Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Imperfectly Empowered podcast. I am your host, Ahna Fulmer. Today, before we get started, I want to give what we would call a sensitive material disclaimer. This can be very triggering for some women, men as well. But today we are talking about miscarriage, stillbirth, and infant loss. It is an honor to have Christina Varvel today on the show to share her poignant story. She is a registered dietitian and blogger at ChristinaVarvel.com, and she is the author of Living Hope: How Giving Birth to Death Brought Life, where she shares her poignant testimony of finding hope amidst the grief of losing two sons. Passionate about creating an open, empathetic dialogue about miscarriage, stillbirth, and infant loss, welcome advocate and author, Christina Varvel. Hi!
Yeah.
Hello! Oh my gosh, this is so fun to see you.
I know, it's been forever.
It really has. I was actually thinking about it. I think the last I saw you would have been at Heather's funeral.
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
Which is years ago, which is
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
Oh, it's such an honor.
Yeah, I
to have
was,
you.
and at Heather's funeral, I was like, let's see, 2 months, 1 month, 2 months, 1 month, 2 months. I'm trying to think of how far along I was pregnant with the twins.
The
So,
twins. I
yes,
remember that.
I was just
Oh,
like newly pregnant with them. So,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
Well,
cool.
I'm so excited to dive into your story. I basically cried my way through this entire book. I'm like
Aw.
sitting in my office sobbing, and I'm like, well, if anyone comes in here, they're gonna think I just like lost a loved one, which is kind of how I felt. It wasn't even like
Um,
my loved one.
yeah.
And that's how I felt. But for all of you guys listening and watching, this is Christina Varvel. Now, what's fun is what people don't know. Christina and I actually go way back, but it's not like we were best friends
Right.
forever. It's just we knew each other from college at Cedarville University. You were there for
One
1 year,
semester. No,
one
one
semester.
semester. Yeah.
And then she
Yeah.
pieced out. She's like, enough of the cornfields.
Well, I went to more cornfields at Purdue University, so it wasn't like I really
It
changed
was like a
scenery.
lateral cornfield transition.
Yes, yeah, it was.
What did you study at Purdue?
Dietetics. So I'm
Okay.
a
Okay.
dietitian,
Well, that makes
nutritionist.
sense. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before we dive into your story and the book, give us a little bit of background and context for how you got to where you are right now. And I gave an intro, so, for everyone listening and watching, you kind of have an idea of what the book is about and what we're going to dive into. But give us a little bit of the backstory and um, sort of how you even got to this point of writing this book. So you can tell us a little bit about you and Brett and your family up until this point.
Yes. So I guess kind of where we were, I had two children, an older daughter and a son, and they were, oh my goodness, trying to think of age. It was kind of like the kindergarten-ish, toddler stage,
Yeah.
right? And we had always knew that we wanted more kids. We didn't feel peace about stopping at just two children, but kind of where we were at for a while, because there was going to be an age gap. We just didn't have peace of then having it. My husband is a filmmaker. He's an actor and director, and let's just say it's not been an easy road in the
Yeah.
filmmaking journey. Yeah. That's a whole nother probably podcast. But so we literally live kind of project to project. It's literally daily manna for us. And where kind of Brett was in a season of life, it was kind of in this waiting period. And financially, we weren't really felt peace about having, children and whatnot. But then, of course, is there ever a good time to have children?
Amen.
And I am definitely a type A planner, and there is that, like, things have to feel like they have to line up and all of that. And that is I think part of my story too, is God wants me to know that I cannot control my life. I cannot plan all of the details, and only he is sovereign and in control of everything. And so anyways, there was just a time where we were kind of like, we can't keep waiting. Let's try to have some more children. And with my first two, I had absolutely no problem getting pregnant. Very just like immediately, not, there was no fear or even thought of a miscarriage, which I think is very common for most people. Before, it's just like, you don't think, you're like, yeah, I'm going to have a child, and you get the news, the pregnancy test and all of that. And so that's kind of how it was with my first two children. And so came time to, okay, let's start trying. I got pregnant right away. And then at 13 weeks, it was just a normal kind of go-in checkup, and where they just do the heart Doppler, just want to hear the heartbeat. And I had my children with me, my older two children, because again, I just was like, this is normal. I'm just going to hear the heartbeat, and we're just going to say, yep, you're on your way type of thing. And that's when the story begins. And I did not hear a heartbeat, and the doctor did not. And she was like, well, let's do an ultrasound. And sure enough, I had lost that child. And so then the grief story begins. I did not ever set out to write a book. It actually happened by accident.
Which typically is what the best authors say. So I'll throw that out there.
Well, good. Well, and I was thinking about that. I feel like in a lot of ways, people, when things just, they fall in your lap, right? Like you didn't plan it to happen. And so I did not sit down and say, I'm going to write a book about this. Not at all. It came out of more, I always was a journaler, since junior high. I have all my journals, and I am a verbal processor. I emote. I'm a very emotional person, and how I process, I have to get it out. And that was then in the form of writing. And like I remember, it was probably, I'm trying to remember the timeline, but it was probably like a week after we had lost the baby. And I kind of go through the journey of how my doctor, I was right on the line of the first and second trimester, and that's where she gave me the option of, we can do a D&C, or you could actually go in labor. And I chose to be induced, and was able to.
Which, let's pause on that for a second, because I think, as a mother myself, who, and I've said this before on the podcast, I never had a miscarriage. I never had any difficulty getting pregnant. And as much as I can empathize with the sense of losing someone you love, it is just not the same as the struggle of losing a child. Not that we compare grief and what's harder or easier, but just the difference. And so walking through, and this book, I left an Amazon review, and I said this, I think as a woman who has not struggled with these things or walked that journey, it helped equip me to understand and come alongside someone who has better, with more understanding. And this was such an interesting just medical point that I would have frankly never thought about, which is ironic because I worked in emergency medicine for 10 years. But when I had women miscarrying, either I delivered the baby right there, which I did several times, or they went to OB. And so like out of my department. And so I never had any follow up with what happened after that. So I think this is a really valuable point just of education. When a woman finds out that her child no longer has a heartbeat, there are a couple options from there. And share that a little bit. Like, what are those options, and maybe advantages, disadvantages to them in your experience?
Yeah. So, and that was the thing. I kind of sat there, and and again, I only have heard of a D&C, right? Again, I didn't really know much at all about it. And we can get to, if we want, a little later about the whole, like, nobody talks about miscarriages. So I didn't even, I'm like, nobody has told me their story or their experience of it. I may have heard or known a little bit about it, but I kind of was like, I asked her, I said, so what happens in a D&C? And she was like, well, we go in and basically take everything out. And, like, and she didn't like, I'm sitting there in my response. I kind of was like, I mean, to be honest and vulnerable, I was like, that sounds like an abortion, but I was like, but I know it wasn't an abortion because my baby was already, deceased.
Yeah.
But like the whole process of just going in and just like whatever. And I kind of was just like, okay. And because she gave me that option, like we went home and we talked about it. And because what I was afraid of, what would it do?
Yeah.
Is it easier to just rip it off like a Band-Aid? Because when you're suffering and you're in grief and you're in pain, you want it to go away as fast as possible. So that's what we do as humans. We want to stop it. And I'm thinking, if I hold that baby, like, is that going to actually wreck me? Versus,
and for those of you that don't understand, a D&C is dilation and curettage, and basically it's quite literally just like sucking the womb of what's in it, because infection can happen. There's a lot of things, like ultimately the tissue needs to be taken out is the bottom line. And with that, though, you don't deliver a child that you can hold, because you're basically just taking everything out. So that's what she's saying here is she couldn't do that with the D&C.
Correct. And now, because again, I was farther along, right? So there is that period where before then, that is just the standard. Like they don't have the option. So I have friends who, again, after when I talk to them, that have told me about the D&C, it is hard for them. Like, and again, that, like I said, that I was blessed to be at a period where I did have the option, but for those who don't have the option, it is hard, because they want that closure, I guess you could even say, or the like, this was a baby rather than just a bunch of tissue, this was a child, and they don't have that opportunity. And I know that then is a whole different grief. And then
I've seen 10 weeks as the smallest that I've seen. I was in my second year of nursing school and I delivered a 10-week a 10-week fetus, basically, that had lost a heartbeat in fast track, actually, in the ER. That was an experience. And at 10 weeks, I don't think I've seen less than 10 weeks like actually delivered, but I mean, it looks like a tiny doll alien is like the best way I can describe it, but it is formed. And that's the wildest thing, is like you see the formation of toes, even at 10 weeks, like you could start to see little like genital parts if it's a boy, and eyes and hands. I mean, it's a really profound experience. So I don't know when do you not get the option for
I
delivery?
think it is once you hit the second trimester. At least that's what my physician had kind of told me, because I was at 13 weeks, which is literally on where they say you're transitioning over to the second trimester. So I think if it's before the second trimester, they usually just do the D&C, and so forth. And I know that there's, a lot, like, people can also have a lot of just bleeding, even after it, and it can be really hard. And that's something that I think when you know someone that has had a miscarriage, and let's say whether it's earlier or even after, because me actually delivering, my body thought I just had a baby, so my milk was coming in, and like, so just because somebody may not, like, they still have a lot of physical ramifications, even if on the outside it doesn't look it. And then, of course, the emotional goes even longer, that we have to continue to walk through. I did want to say one thing, though, about a pro, about being able to deliver, if somebody were to have that option, is that my husband was able to experience the full, and hold our son and go through that. And I think that it's like kind of like some men, it's hard because there is that detachment in the sense of they didn't carry the baby. But I think deep down, a lot of men are also suffering, but they just, you know what I mean? They shove it.
Yes.
They don't talk about it. And I don't think that our society really looks at the man and like sees that this was a part of them as well. And my husband was able to grieve, hold, and be a part of it. And it really bonded us, I would say, definitely even more because we both had that experience. So,
yeah. And I think you share that really well in the book. And, you know, not to speed through the book, but I mean, you
no,
went
it's
through
fine.
this twice, just so
Yes.
people
Yeah.
understand. This was a double experience for her, which is part of the like, I like get through the first one and I'm like, oh
Yes.
my gosh, we're gonna have to do this again.
The exact same thing. Yep.
As
Then,
I'm reading, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's not even my children, and I'm already feeling this.
yeah.
So you went through this process twice, and I also appreciate, and we'll dive a little bit more into grief and walking through this with people in the second half. But um, what you're saying, I could see really well. You laid it out beautifully in the book, just the sense of being able to grieve the process well and what that looked like and how delivery was able to play part of that. So like you said, if someone has the choice, I mean, bottom line, this book is obviously the link will be in our show notes. You all know that. But, if you have been through this or somebody that has been through this, even if you never have, and we pray that you never do, being able to read this just to have the understanding, if God forbid that is your story, or God willing, it's your story. I guess we could change the narrative there.
Yeah.
Then you need to be prepared. And I just think I have not read a better book so far on what that looks like. And if you have the option, I think you explained the delivery process really well and where the healing came from in that. So I really appreciated that. What would you say, this is sort of like a side note question, in writing this book or in reading this book, is there one point that you have found resonates with people more than any? Do you hear a consistent, especially for women who have experienced this? Is this sort of like a pause in the story? I'm just
No,
curious
it's fine.
if there's been like a consistent theme.
I One of the things I would say, as far as the book as a whole and the writing as a whole, is I've heard, someone said, and it kind of, I've heard this in different ways of like, you said things that I was thinking and I didn't say it out loud because I was too afraid to.
Yeah.
And I think as a whole, the theme was from women who have walked it, like they felt seen and heard and understood when maybe they weren't able to express it or know how to grieve it themselves. And so it was kind of like which was my goal. That was like my goal of sharing this. When I got to the point of like, this could, I could put this in a book and share it. I was like, I want women and men who have gone, I have had men read it, to know that they are not alone in their struggle. Yeah. And that is, I think, the biggest thing that people have told me, like, I feel not alone now. Like, in the things, even the very real and raw and vulnerable things that I share. And
yes, which we're going to dive into more, you guys. Don't worry. We'll get there.
I feel it's like people we're scared, right? We're scared to grieve. We're scared to say things that are like, what? Like, what? Why would you even think that, And
why do you think talking about miscarriage is because I've heard this many times. Why do you think it's such a like taboo or shameful thing for women to talk about
I
in your
think,
experience?
yeah, as I talked to women, because I guess I didn't fit that mold because I'm like, I'm going to talk about this,
Yes, which
and
you and me, I mean, girl, we're cut from the same cloth. Like, I'm
yeah, yeah,
perfectly empowered. I'm all about sharing. It's why we're here. Yeah,
yes,
but we are
but
unusual.
yes, yeah, because the more
And why?
but I guess I shouldn't say I'm like perfectly like, oh, I'm gonna, share everything, but there is a shame of something's wrong with me.
Mm,
I did something wrong. That's always I think the first thing that goes through women's mind is,
mm,
what did I do wrong? What is wrong with my body that I killed this child? Like,
mm.
because you're so attached to your child, right? Like, they are a different human being, but they're in you, and you're the one that God created you to give them
Yeah.
the source to live. And then all of a sudden the baby is gone and it dies. You just think, I mean, you're going, like, women, you go through and I did the same thing. Like, did I not take all my vitamins? Did I miss,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh my goodness, I might have been too strenuous with my exercise. I used to teach preschool gymnastics, and it was like little kids, right? And I was in my first trimester, right? Barely even had a
Yeah.
baby bump. And one of the kids like kicked me accidentally. And
Mm.
then I'm thinking, did that kill my child? And you're going through the whole list, and it's always like, it's me, it's me, it's me. And so I think that shame that we carry of, um something's wrong with me, and I don't
Yeah.
want people to know that.
And
um
then what would you say from your experience? And you talk about this in the book, but specifically with this thought, what would you say to that shame?
mm,
What would you say now to the woman who, because shame is shame, right? Whether it's a miscarriage or it's something
right.
else that's happened in your life. I mean,
Yes. Yeah.
shame is shame. It's a human
Yeah.
emotion. And so, whether it be specific to miscarriage or whatever it is in your experience, what would you say to that feeling of shame
Yeah.
and
Well,
the woman who experiences it?
and I have heard that shame is when it becomes an identity statement, right? Like,
Mm.
I am my struggle. I
Mm.
am, it's not, I struggle with this, I struggle with anxiety, I struggle with depression,
Yes.
I struggle with whatever. It is, I am this.
Mm.
And so I think that that's where that shame of we we're not detaching it in a sense of, this is something that happened to me. It is this, I am this thing going through it. And
Mm.
so what I
That's
would
beautiful, though. It's a great definition.
yeah, so what I would say is, no, no, you didn't cause the death of your child. You did not, you aren't your grief. Like,
Yeah.
even you are not this. Like, this is something that has tragically happened to you. And I think that as you walk through, what I had learned to then, because what happens is the grief then becomes you.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's when we can get into that spiral of darkness, instead of seeing it as kind of something separate and like, wait, I'm actually more than my miscarriage.
Yeah.
I'm a mother of two other children. I am a
Yeah.
wife. I am a friend. I am
Yeah.
fill in the blanks. I am more than what is happening to me. And then we can kind of take grief and see it, and then be able to deal with it, instead of it being no, this is my life.
Okay, I did not give her this heads up. Christina, we're going to play a quick round of this or that.
Oh
It is
no.
very simple, no stress, two options.
Okay.
She's like, I'm type A. You didn't have
I
me
know
plan
you
for
didn't
this.
prepare me.
Okay. It's pretty straightforward. I should call it would you rather. I keep saying this. Oh my gosh, I need to like put this in my script. Would you rather cake or pie?
Cake.
What's your favorite kind of cake?
My mom always, for my birthday forever, chocolate cake with homemade peanut butter icing.
Yeah, I mean it's an oldie but a goodie, but it
I
has to be
know.
made well.
Yes.
Would you rather listen to music or a podcast?
Music.
Yeah. What's your favorite? What do you listen to? Like, what's your go-to when you turn it on? This is likely what you're going to hear on Christina's playlist.
Well, we can get to that. I actually have a Spotify and YouTube playlist of the songs that were very, very meaningful to me through my
Ooh,
grief
I love
journey.
that. Yep. Let's get that link.
I mean, whatever, like worship, contemporary Christian,
Yeah.
is basically what I go to. So
Yeah. Um, so would you rather go to a movie premiere? So let's bring Brett into this. Would you rather see
oh no.
Brett in a movie or would you rather see him in the theater in like a play?
Oh, like a theater play,
Yes.
movie. Yeah. Yeah.
What's your favorite movie he's ever done?
Oh, well, okay. Well, spoiler alert. We just
Here
finished
we
a
go.
film.
Bring it. Sorry, Brett.
I know. I know. We did our own film the fall of 2022, and he worked all last year, 2023, completing the film. It's called Disciples in the Moonlight. And we are now, it's finished, and he is now shopping it around to distributors,
Yeah.
and we are now seeing how we can get it out to the country and possibly the world.
Is this
So
the first one that has been done on your own?
no, we did one
Okay.
years ago that he produced and directed and so forth. So this is one that we've been actually trying to do for the last about 8 years, and which the Lord is sovereign over that, and we see now His hand of why we needed to wait and so forth. And so it's basically, the premise is, what would kind of like, what would it be like if the Bible was illegal in the United States? And it's this team that has to basically take the word of God across state lines to like underground churches. So it's very, very exciting. And that would be I watched it a few weeks ago for the first time, because I'm one of those people that I don't want to see it. I don't want to see his work until it's completely finished. Sometimes he'll ask me my opinion. Well, he's always asked me my opinion, but I was kind of like, I don't want to see it. And so I got my own kind of private screening, and it is phenomenal. And that is probably so far my favorite project of his.
That's so fun. I love that. Yeah, that really is. We should get you and Brett on the podcast to talk about filmmaking.
Definitely.
That is a whole nother world.
Yes.
Okay, would you rather be a ninja or a pirate? Very serious question.
Ninja.
What would you do with your ninja skills? This is actually on my bucket list, not to be a ninja, but to like self-defense, like Krav Maga or something.
Yes. Yeah.
Literally on my list.
Yeah. So Brett and I forever, we're waiting for the kids to get a little older, but I said, well, maybe this will be, I know. I was like, maybe this will be our 40 when we turn 40, and like it'll be the year, the 40, whatever. We want to take like MMA classes. Yes. And do like a little bit of everything. And so, definitely interesting.
I'm in. I'm in. I'll join.
Okay.
From across state lines. Would you rather own a personal yacht or a private jet?
Oh,
I know.
Probably a private jet.
Sorry about that one.
I really want to travel all over.
Yeah.
And so a jet, so I can get everywhere.
Where's the first place you're flying on your private jet?
Italy.
Yes. I'll join you there too.
Yes. I have Italian blood in me, and that's always been my, like, I would love to go and see where my grandparents and great grandparents are from. So
yeah. And it is beautiful. And warm.
Yes.
Love it. Yes. You guys are in Indiana, right?
Yes.
And we're in Pennsylvania. So
yeah, we got the same
guys
weather.
In cold weather states, you understand.
Yes. Yeah.
You understand. Well, let's talk a little bit more about the nitty-gritty. Like this is the uncomfortable elements that are just so hard to bring up in normal conversation, right? It's like you've had a miscarriage, or multiple stillbirth, like fill in the blank. And this is true even of birth, actually, even of delivering a quote unquote normal experience. I was shocked how much after that I was not prepared for. And I went to nursing school.
Hmm.
But like breastfeeding, there was elements to breastfeeding that nobody told me how painful it would be. Nobody told me that like my nipples would literally be red and cracked and like no one prepared me for
I
that.
know.
And it's like unless you have the right people in your life, you're not talking to anybody about it. And that's just a, quote unquote normal experience or like sex after delivery. No one
Right.
really prepared me for that.
Right.
Um or going to the bathroom after having a vaginal delivery, like so many things. And that's with a quote unquote like happy experience. And so I think to your point, this is one of the reasons that these physical things aren't talked about after a really sorrowful experience because it's like you're already having a hard time verbalizing what you're feeling, let alone then all of the physical things that come after that. And so again, for the sake of education or for the sake of um, just helping the listeners feel seen wherever you are, those of you listening and watching in your own journey. I want Christina to be able to share some of that, which she does in detail in the book. But one of the things that I had not thought of, despite the fact that I'm medical, is the fact that you would lactate after delivering
Mhm.
a miscarriage.
Mhm.
That
Mhm.
makes perfect
Mhm.
sense. I just hadn't really
Mhm.
thought about that and the grief
Mhm.
that would come from
Yes.
having to suppress. So tell me a little bit about that and what you walked through there twice.
Yes. Well, so to kind of to go from the very beginning, when I delivered our first, so it was a boy. Again, we were able to see um, and tell it was a boy very clearly,
Yes.
and and so we named him Seth, and I delivered him, and then the placenta was not coming out. And after delivering him, and we had to wait. And then, of course, from a medical standpoint, if you leave any tissue in there,
Yeah.
you are risking infection. And I then had to go get a D&C after I delivered. So I kind of had to
Mm.
do, which is, even though the baby was already out, it was another thing. You're just
Yeah. Just
the thing.
traumatizing. Yeah.
Right, right. And so it's like even after anyone miscarriages and delivers, you don't want the constant reminders, but you have the constant reminders. And that is
Mhm.
what is the hardest part of it. And so with him, like I said, I had to then go and make sure I got it out. And then the second time that you had mentioned, this happened twice, and it literally was, and then a year later we tried again, and exactly 13 weeks. It was literally living the nightmare again, the exact same thing.
Mm.
Went in, delivered. It was another boy. We named him Roi, after the name of God, El Roi, which means you're the God who sees me. And so that time I delivered, but then as I went home, wait, I think I'm like trying to remember. Sorry. Again, I have to like, okay,
Listen,
which
I
one? And no,
totally
it was
understand.
it was after Roe. I was continuing to deliver pieces of my placenta.
Mm.
And
Mm.
whereas I didn't, she was able to get all of it out. But
Mhm.
then she did kind of say, you may still see some remnants from your uterus. And so sure enough, I was then continuing to deliver the placenta. And of course now I'm like, I'm worried, and did I get
Yeah.
and whatnot. And I ended up, even after Roe, having like severe leg pain. And then we were like, well, you might have a blood clot. So I had to go in, and I'm sitting at the table. I don't know if this made it in the book. So I'm like, I should read my book again. No. But because I wrote so much, and
Yes, exactly.
I had to
Yeah.
cut so much
Yeah.
out, which is normal. But I had to go get, an ultrasound on my leg, and I'm laying there. And of course, I'm like, now, I don't want anything to do with a doctor. I don't want to be
Yeah.
on a table. Like, get me home. I do not want to be on a table. And she's like, and I'm like moving and she keeps yelling at me to stop. And I'm thinking like, you don't know what I just went through, and whatever and stuff. And so I'm dealing with that. And it's just like you do. I'm like, can my body just be normal again? And then
medical fatigue, she has not mentioned this yet, but you also have Crohn's disease.
Yes.
So the whole concept of, chronic disease, for anyone that has suffered from a chronic disease, like, you also understand this, but, I'm sure, not to put words in your mouth, but I'm sure there's just this underlying baseline of medical fatigue where, like, that underlying sense of, I would just love for my body to feel normal.
Yes.
So to
Yes.
add on top of this,
yes. Yeah.
I mean, that compounds it even more.
Well, and that then I did flare around the time of both these miscarriages. So then I go through the book of the journey of, and this is where I was like, it's me. I have this bowel disease. I have this autoimmune disease. I am killing my child. Which, going through it, we actually there is no conclusive answer to that. If the autoimmune was reacting with them, but yes, it was. Then I had to deal with the flare on, so you have the physical manifestations that are on top of the emotional. And I think even after Roe, it was a lot more. And then, the milk comes in, which I knew I had done that with Seth. And then you have to literally, I have a cousin who is a lactation consultant, and she was just like, all right, here, normally you're going to the lactation consultant after birth saying, what are all the things I need to do to, get my milk flowing? And this, I'm saying, these are all the things you need to do to suppress your milk. And literally hanging over the sink and trying to get milk to come out, and emotional. And you're just like, and of course, you don't waste breast milk. That is like, it's the gold, you don't waste it. And I'm watching it come out of me, and there's no baby to give it to. And it's that constant reminder. And so
of loss, it's more loss.
Yes. It's more loss. Yeah. It's more loss. And then as you're going through all the physical, like you had said, like, you just want your body to be normal. I was just thinking, I want my physical body to be normal so I can focus and work on the emotional, because now it's this like, and it's kind of all webbed together. But it does feel like I have to deal with all of the physical, which then is fueling the emotional, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think, again, something that you did explain beautifully in the book is just constantly holding in tension the quote unquote normal experiences that were in such juxtaposition to the abnormal experiences that you were having, meaning like lactation is totally normal, but instead of it now being this joyous thing, it's a reminder of grief. Going into the hospital, I'm quoting the book. You said this and I laughed and like cried out loud all at the same time. But you're like, there isn't a checklist for what to bring to the hospital when you are delivering a baby that won't be coming home. And I laughed out loud while I'm crying because I'm like, it's so true. It's just this sense of, I should be rejoicing and yet I'm devastated. And just that really, challenging living in that tension for so many different reasons. One of the other things that you talked about that was also just like, was something I'd never thought about, is the options of what to do with the child or the tissue with the remains.
Yeah.
And that was an education for me as well. Talk a little bit about that with miscarriage or stillbirth, what it looks like on that end of it once you have delivered the tissue or the formed child, depending on the type of miscarriage or stillbirth.
Yeah. So there's actually like laws about it. So it's not even just say, oh, you can do whatever, you want type of thing. And so obviously if somebody has a D&C, there's nothing, like, they're not gonna, they dispose of the child. But once you deliver a child, if it's after 20 weeks, you wait, I don't know. Now I gotta I gotta think about this. I think I wrote about it. You're putting me on the spot. It's been a while.
No
You
worries. That's why
okay,
you
so
guys have to get the book.
I
That's
know
why you
you
have to
have to
get
get
the
the
book.
book. So
That's
because okay,
exactly
so we
right.
were 13. So they basically told us that we could um take they would um uh
Dispose of the body.
yes, they would cremate it.
Yes.
So what they do with
Yes.
our hospital, they're like, hey, we will take the baby. We put them. Then they get them all cremated, and then there's actually a spot at our in our town's what's it called, cemetery, where
Yeah.
they spread the ashes. And
Interesting. Hmm.
and so they'll take all the babies from, I don't know how, like every so many months or whatever, and they will spread the ashes. So they were like, we can
Hmm.
do that. They were like, or we could call the funeral home, and the funeral home will take the baby, and we could then either bury the baby or cremate it ourselves.
Hmm.
I think then after 20 weeks, the difference is they basically are like, I don't think the hospital will handle the baby. Like
Gotcha. Yeah.
you have to then call the funeral
Yes.
home, and
Yes.
you
Because
either
now it's
bury it or
viable. So it's,
yes,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So they will,
Yeah.
that's the difference. So the hospital up until that point you can give them the option to take care of it.
Mm.
And so then then you're like, again, these are decisions you have no idea, and you don't think, and you're in
Yeah.
the midst of grief, and you're just like,
Physical pain, all of it.
yeah, you're just like,
Yeah.
what's the right answer? And then you're like, am I going to regret something? And
Mm.
all of that. And I was like, well, if either we cremate it, if we take it, or if the hospital, like, I would rather, like, that was kind of like,
Yeah.
we would
Sure.
rather, instead of it just like go to but again, everyone's different.
Hmm.
And so we chose, and then we, of course, we could have like gone through the whole process of burying the baby and whatnot, but we, I don't know, for us, like, and I know we can get into the whole, like, I don't know, theology on cremation versus, whatever.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
on the like,
Listen, I'm like, my theology level would not be high enough to even probably.
yeah, I'm just saying there are, yeah,
I'm fine with cremation. We'll put it that way.
okay, yeah, and some people
I
aren't, and that's
personally want
perfectly
my
fine.
body to be spread under a tree
There you
because I
go.
want my death to represent life because
Yes,
hallelujah, this is not my home.
yes, yes.
I
And
will
our
be more
bodies,
alive than ever after I die. So
right,
give me a
exactly. And
tree.
God is going to redeem our bodies, whether somebody was
Amen.
burned to the stake or whatever, right? So
Amen.
anyways, and
Anyway.
again, and that's people, and I want to respect those people, but so we did not see anything wrong with cremating. So
Yeah.
that was the thing. I was like, well, then and we didn't want to bury, like, it, in our backyard, because what if we move? I was like, I want
Sure.
this baby with us. So that's what we chose for both of them. We had the funeral home come get them, had them cremated, and then we have these little, like, jars that
Hmm.
we have of Seth and Rowie. So
Hmm.
but yeah, like I
And
said,
the
it's just
scene that
something
you
to think about.
depict in the book is really poignant with that because it's just so raw, it's vulnerable, and the concept of like Brett bringing, I think you said like Brett brought the jar to work or something, and it was just this is so real, and
Yeah,
this is the conversation. And for those of you listening and watching, some of you have already felt your heart rate pick up a little bit. Some of you have already felt that awkward sense of discomfort, like this just feels weird to talk about. And that's literally why we're talking about it,
yes,
because we
yeah,
need to be able to normalize the conversation so that you are equipped to listen to someone else and give another woman or yourself permission to talk about hard
yeah,
things.
yeah, yes, yeah, because we can't, and that's the thing, is like, when you stuff grief, it's going to come out somehow.
Yeah.
The goal
And
is
it's going to isolate you. And I
yes,
want you to talk about this for a second because you had a great quote. And this is literally leading to what you were just about to say is the grief is going to come out at some point, and how do we have it come out in a healthy way? But you said this, and I want you to talk about this. Um, the quote was, oh, I'm gonna have to read it. I didn't write it out.
that's all right.
Here you go, y'all. Page 5. This is where we are. You said this was after your first one with Seth. You said, as history has shown with my personality, I want the steps needed to fix whatever problem
Yes,
I have. or for God to immediately show me what he's trying to teach me. Am I being punished for sin? Is he trying to tell me of an idol I need to get rid of? I'm scared. At the moment I tip over to really ask them and trying to find the answers, I downward spiral. And then not far from that, you talk about the idea that as history is shown with my personality, you told yourself, I can't isolate myself, which I'm prone to do in pain.
Mm-hmm.
And so where I want, you to be able to speak to that is this idea of isolation and how grief does have a tendency for many of us to make us withdraw.
Mm-hmm.
So talk a little bit about that and how to overcome that,
Mm-hmm.
as we all know that isolation and grief is like bad idea. We don't want that.
Right. I think first it comes back to what we were talking about with shame. I
Yes.
think with any grief and loss and struggle and pain, there is this, again, we take it on ourselves. And so we don't want, I mean, that goes all the way back to Genesis 3, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that is our human response, is to cover, to
Mm-hmm.
isolate, to hide. That
Yeah.
is what we're going to do, whether it is actual sin or an effective sin, which is death and a
Mm-hmm.
miscarriage. And so we take it on ourselves, we shame, and that's therefore is something's wrong with me, and I don't want people to know. I don't want to be more judged.
Yeah.
What are there's the fear of rejection, right?
Mm.
What are people going to think, and so forth. And I think that in our grief we do that. That's why we hide and we isolate, and we don't want people to know. I The other lie that I think the devil will whisper is nobody's like you. You're
Yeah.
alone. You're alone. Like there is this, nobody would understand because nobody's has experienced this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think where there's truth that every person's experience is different.
Mm-hmm.
We are all human, we're all made in the image of God, and there is going to be way more commonality than there actually
Mm-hmm.
is in that. And so that constant of, well, you're the only one, Christina, that is so angry and is questioning God, right? So even
Yeah.
like something like that is like, well, what would people think if they actually knew what I
Mm.
was thinking?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what, fortunately, Brett and I were able to come together, but I think the statistic is 80% of marriages fall apart after a death of a child in any
I
form.
can believe that. Yeah.
And so, because what happens is there is that, right there in the
Mm-hmm.
marriage. So we're not even talking about like friendships and loved ones and whatnot, like even in the marriage where it starts to be this, like, you don't understand, or you're grieving differently than me, or you're not seeing it for my, or what, and that's then where the
Mm-hmm.
division is, because it's very, I mean, let's be honest, grief is so inward. And
Yeah.
whereas
Yeah.
that we do, it's okay, right, if we do it, but we can't stay inward, because that's then where you will downward spiral in the
Yeah.
shame, in the lies of you're alone and there is no hope and people don't understand. And I mean, the list can go on, right? So that's then, how do you step out of that? You have to step out. You have to come out of yourself in the sense of reaching out for help, telling
Mm.
someone, telling people, telling someone that you trust. In the book, I clearly show that the first and best answer is being honest with God.
Mm-hmm.
He already knows. And I love the Psalms. They're my favorite book of the Bible. And it is, if they are so real, they're so vulnerable. They're like,
Yeah.
where were you, God? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
taking that first and foremost to the Lord is the beginning, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next step is share. You don't have to share. You don't have to put it on social media, people,
Right.
like some
Right.
people
Yes.
do. We were vocal
Preach.
about it and we had
Yeah.
people, but I'm saying there isn't this like, well, I have to
It's not
show
all
it.
or nothing is what
It's
you're
not,
saying. It's
you
not
don't have to
exactly.
write a book about it. You know, it's like,
Exactly.
it's not,
Yes.
it is more just like step out to the people that you trust that can come alongside you and walk with you. And I feel like right there, you're able to have those first steps of healing, really.
Yeah. You mentioned marriage, and I appreciated your vulnerability too about a very understandable fear of intimacy. Having sex again, this idea of like protecting yourself again, it's that
Mm-hmm.
protective piece
Mm-hmm.
from more loss. And it's like I'm terrified to get pregnant
Yes.
again. You talked about that, which I think was so good. But talk to us a little bit more just about healing in marriage briefly. Like what were steps that you and Brett took? Because I think what you said is so good that even within marriage, it's incredibly difficult to heal from this. And if somebody is walking through grief of any kind and struggling, what are the steps that they can take that you and Brett would say from your experience? How quickly do you talk to each other first? Or do you give space for each other to grieve in their own way and you talk to someone else first and then come together? Like, what is the process for someone to
Mm-hmm.
even take that next step out?
Yeah, that's a great question. I everyone's going to be different in the sense of how they're going to grieve.
Mm,
And that's just finding that what is going to work the best for you. And so in a marriage, the two of you will probably not grieve the same.
mm,
And so I feel like patience is huge, and like just being patient with each other. The biggest thing I think with grief that people need to understand is that there's no timetable. There is
yes.
no timetable, and it's not linear.
Yeah.
So when you look at your spouse, you have to keep that in mind, that maybe one of the spouse is going to be walking through healing a little faster than the other
Mhm.
one, but they can't shame and they can't, put down the other one because they're not doing it fast enough. Like
Mm,
like thinking or even saying out loud, like, come on, why are you still grieving? And why are you so sad? And, and all of those things can be very damaging, because then we're not listening. Listening is huge too. Like taking the time to sit and like, how are you doing? And where are you at? My husband and I have a great marriage where we are each other's best friends. So it is we were a lot of times so for me personally, because I wrote, he would give me space. That was the thing of,
mhm.
we had this, like, I was like, hon, I gotta go write. And he's like, okay. And I'm kind of the one, like, I need to get it out now. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I gotta like vomit this out. And
Yeah.
so he's like, okay, what do you need? And I was like, hey, tomorrow, can I, whatever. He's like, sure, I'll take the kids. Or, I mean, of course, with his mom was available, we
Yeah.
would get someone or whatever. And I would
Yeah.
go off and write. And then when I was done, I gave it to him and he read it. And
Yeah.
he was able to see and process as
Mm,
well what I was going through. And then it helped him be able to grieve as well.
mm,
So that was a very personal, tangible way that we did it.
mhm,
And so whatever that could look like, maybe someone isn't a writer or a journaler, or maybe it is just talking, or they're doing
mm.
something artistic, or whatever that looks like. Maybe it's just getting in, crawling up and having a good cry, and Brett would
Yeah.
just hold me,
Yeah.
just even just his presence was, I see you and it's okay. And I'm here
Yeah.
with you, type of
Yeah.
thing. And so we have to just, like, again, the whole, like, there's no timetable, it's not linear. So even if someone months down the road has a whatever, like, it's just okay. Like, you
Right.
just,
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
bad. I think we just see it as
Yes.
like, this is a bad thing, and it's
Yeah.
not bad. If we can see grief as a good and a beautiful and needed thing, we can
Yes.
offer each other the grace to be able to walk through it, however that looks. And then on the flip side, where I was saying, like, one may be struggling, the person who's struggling can't look at the person that isn't struggling and think that,
Right.
oh, well, you must not think that this baby was that important. Like,
Right.
no, that's not
It's
what
again
that.
not linear. It's like that that might be
Yes.
tomorrow for them.
Yes. Yeah.
But right
And
now it's not today. Yeah.
yes. And by
Yeah.
God's grace, like there were moments where I was doing really well and he
Yes.
was not, and I was able to carry him. And then the
Yes.
moments it kind of flipped where I was really struggling and he was able to carry me. And
Yeah.
that's
Giving
how,
each other space.
yeah.
Yeah. To do that. So I want to offer another tangible thought. I love how you said you would write and then Brett would read it. I think one of the challenges for a lot of us is women or men even is it's hard to say what you're really thinking to a spouse's face.
Mm.
And another thought would be for someone who doesn't want to write, the idea of just voice recording and it's verbal vomit. I mean, you
Mm.
just whatever, it's like instead of shouting to an empty room, you record it
Mm.
and you just let yourself go and you express your thoughts and you record it. And then maybe you share it with your spouse later. And maybe you're not even in the room when they're listening to it.
Mm.
But to be able to let them hear your grief in real time and for them to be prepared that like this is raw and you have to be able to handle what I'm saying and understand this is me grieving, but this is also maybe a way for couples to I mean, I'm thinking like this would, be a practical thing
I like
for
that.
many marriages just to
Yes.
be whether it's
Yes.
grief or anything and to be able
Yes.
to
Yeah.
play it back
Uh-huh.
later if you
Yeah.
don't feel like having it in real time is something I'm just throwing out there in real time because I love
The
the
writing aspect, but
journaling.
then no,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's great. And another point too is, men, and or at least my husband, he wants to immediately fix the problem, right?
Oh,
So
amen. That sounds
it's
familiar.
yeah, like trying to find the solution because like he sees me in pain and suffering and he wants to
Yeah.
take that away because
What do
he
we
loves
do
me.
about it? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that with the writing, and I like your voice idea, and it's just like saying, hey babe, look, you don't even have to respond to this. Like,
Yes.
I'm not
Don't respond
looking,
to it.
yeah, or don't respond. Yeah, like I'm not looking for an answer. I'm not looking for
Yeah.
whatever. If you have something, like, okay, but I just need to get this out and I just need to listen.
Yeah.
And it then puts the pressure off of him to feel
Mhm.
like, oh, I gotta answer this or I gotta whatever. It's like,
Mhm.
no, I just want you to
Mhm.
hear me.
Mhm.
And that's kind of how we tried to operate that. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things that you're passionate about and is the topic for your next book, and I think this is beautiful, is creating that space for people to share their experiences so that we can better come alongside someone who has experienced miscarriage, stillbirth, or infant loss.
Mhm.
What share with us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I had after my book being out and people knowing my story, I had several people that would come to me asking, hey, my so and so, my friends, my loved one, my whatever,
Yeah.
just lost a miscarriage. What like, and these were women who had never had a miscarriage, so they were like,
Yes.
what can I do to help them? And honestly, I got tired of like typing out a response. And so last year, somebody had done that to me, and I sat there and I was like, all right, da, 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 da. And I'm typing out all this like, do this, don't do this. Here's some encouraging tips. These are the things to
Mm.
avoid. And I'm like about ready to push send. And it was like, Christina, you could write a book about this. And I like pushed send and
Mm.
I was like, Christina, you could write a book about this.
Oh.
I was like, I should do that. And so I started the process. And I even have a like a form that people could fill out that I try to spread the word of, hey, if you have experienced loss, I would love to know what were the do's and don'ts. Like, what were the really
Mm.
encouraging things? What were the not encouraging things? And gather kind of that out so it's more than just my experience
Mhm.
and just things that I've heard by talking to people. And so my goal is I want it to be, it'll probably be more like a little booklet,
Like a
not as like a
collection.
full,
Yeah.
yeah, like one
Are
of
you
like your
still
little
collecting
booklets.
responses?
I am still, cause life gets busy and
Yeah, sure.
I'm still
Oh,
working on it.
absolutely.
So I could give you the link of
Yeah,
that
please.
people
Yes.
can, because I have gotten some phenomenal things. And I think that people are going to be, I cried, Anna, when I read some of these things that the things that people say that are just, and it's people just don't, you don't understand. People just
you
don't,
don't
you
know.
can't, like, I didn't understand before. And I know that I have said a lot of things that were probably like, whoa, I should not have said that. We all do it. And so I just want to bring awareness and something tangible that people can see and be like, oh, okay, these are the things that I think this person would help, and things to definitely please avoid if all possible.
Yes. For any of you who have experienced miscarriage, infant loss, stillbirth, to be able to share your experience so that can get included in the book would be awesome. It's helping all of us, just collectively as women and men, to be able to sympathize and share in the grief as we want to do and should be doing. I want to conclude with this sort of full circle moment. One of the things that in my own life, and you have mentioned this several times as well, grief is often so closely related to fear. And on this side of eternity, in our human state, it is so hard to separate the two. And you share such a beautiful, at one point in your book, and I think a lot of you listening and watching can relate, but I just want to read something from her book. And Christina says, "How do I move on from my past when it has made me who I am today? I loved and cared too much for a son and then another son, and it ended with ashes on my bedside table." And I will probably not get through this without crying. "Who am I today when I feel so lost, when my future changes in a matter of a silent heart Doppler, when I constantly feel like I am in limbo? When once again I have to delete social media off my phone because other women's lives are full of a hopeful future while mine is a blank slate." Ladies, men, if this is you listening, this is Christina's answer to her own struggle. She says later, "The Holy Spirit reminded me of this. He doesn't love me any less because of my past or because he is continuing to allow pain and suffering in my life. I'm on my knees in this park with my face pressed onto the carpet. I'm on my knees with my face pressed onto the carpet of my living room as we pray. I can't get up from this position. This is where I am supposed to be. I'm so overwhelmed in this moment. This is enough. This is my purpose in the pain, to worship, to fall at his feet, not to do anything else. Not living up to others' expectations or my own expectations. Before I was a wife, before I was a mom, I was and am a daughter of the King. Nothing in this life can change that. If I were to literally stand in the presence of Jesus and didn't do another thing, it would be enough. My relationship with him and my worship of him is enough to glorify his name." And that
I needed that
reminder right
there.
Amen. Don't we all? But you just are such an inspiration, your willingness to be vulnerable. And at the end of the day, to allow the Lord to work through that pain and to recognize that in the end, it is all about worship, whether it's through struggle, whether it's through grief, whether it's through blessing, that at the end we worship through it all. And for Jesus, that's enough. And so that's really the call, is to worship. And that's what I was encouraged by. And it was just such an honor to have you here in your story. Where can people find you and keep an eye on you and learn more about what you do and get this book and the next book coming?
Yeah. So my website is ChristinaVarvel.com. And that's basically where I'm at. I'm not on social media currently. That could be another blog post. I'm not on social media. And so people can buy my book on my website, or my book is also on Amazon that you can find. I have a hard copy and an ebook version on Amazon. You can get the hard copy. One of these days, I'd love to do an audio book if my husband can take some time.
Yeah, there you go.
I would love to do the audio book. But that's a goal I still want to do. But anyways, I also blog. So on ChristinaVarvel.com, I have a blog that I continue to just write and share about life in general. So people can know and follow me and so forth. So
yeah, ChristinaVarvel.com. Of course, as always, we will have the book link in the show notes or on YouTube in the description. And yeah, check her out. Also, be sure to fill out that link in that form if you have experienced loss similar and want to be able to share your story. You all have heard it from me many, many times. It is the one thing that no one can ever take away and no one can ever duplicate. It is your story, and that is a gift that the Lord has given you to share. So thank you so much for sharing yours, Christina. It was an honor.
Yeah, thank you so much. I've been blessed by this. Thank you.
Thank you for watching the Imperfectly Empowered podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the channel by clicking below. And if you missed our last video, then be sure to check it out right here. We'll see you next time on the podcast. Your story matters and you are loved.